Picking up where we left off, we've got zigzag lines and we've got S-curve lines, and now the next type of line that we're going to do is called a bumping line. So a bumping line is probably the most challenging because there's the most amount of clicks that you have to do. All right, everybody go over here to your tool panel on the left side of your screen. Find your pen tool, which is right here. You want the pen tool, not the freeform pen tool. So we want this guy right here. We're going to come down to where we have our fill and our stroke, and I need you all to make sure that you do not have a fill. So to turn off the fill, we're going to click on the fill box, and we're going to click on this line, red line, the white box right here, to turn it off. So here we have no fill, and I have a stroke color, which in this case is black, which is fine. Any color that you could see is going to be fine. All right, so we're going to come over here onto our screen. I want you all to watch me do this first. To make a bumping line, you're going to click once to drop an anchor point. Once you drop that anchor point, you're going to move straight over to the right, just like we did before. And you're going to drag, you're going to click and drag and hold, and you're going to move down, 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 down until you have a nice bump like this. Now I'm going to let go. So nothing is different at this point so far. When I let go, that's what my line looks like. Here's the part that gets different. Watch this. Instead of coming back up here and making another roller coaster or S-curvy line, what I'm going to do is move up here, and I'm going to re-click on this anchor point. You guys see what happens when I go to click on this, that little thing that appears next to my pen tool? That makes it stop so that it can change direction. So I just click on that one time and it stops. Now when I come across this way, now I can do this. Click and drag, and look what happens. It bumps and then it goes back up and down again. So I'm going to do that again. Watch this. Stop it by clicking here. Come across. Click and drag down and to the right to bump it, stop it, come straight across. Click down and to the right, stop it. Down and to the right, stop it. How do I end it? V. All right, what we need to do now is we need to clear our paper. So everyone follow along with me. To clear your paper, you're going to come up here. I want you to save these lines. I don't want you to delete them. You're going to take the black arrow tool. Everybody take your selection tool. You're going to drag a box around everything here on your page. And then what we're going to do is hold shift. Hold shift on the keyboard. And you're going to drag in from one of the corners to shrink everything down. And then we're going to move it over onto the gray area so it's out of the way. So the snowman figure that we're going to create is going to be made mostly out of shapes. And the shapes we're going to use are going to be ellipses. Now, for the snowman creature, figure, cartoon character guy, we're going to want to fill it with a color that is not white, because white we won't be able to see on our white piece of paper. So come over here, and we're going to double click your fill color, and we're going to make it an off-white color. So I'm making mine like kind of like a light bluish color. It's not white, but it's light-ish, okay? And then click OK. Now, for the stroke color, you don't want it to be outlined in black. It's a snowman. It wouldn't have that much contrast. So we're going to use a color that is a little bit darker shade of blue. So my snowman stroke will be a slightly darker blue. So we've got a fill, which is an off-white, and we have an outline, which is a darker version of that color. You can make your snowman any color that you want, except for white, and don't make him yellow because that's just gross. So just drag out a circle that is going to be your largest circle, so about that size right there, and let go. So you have the base of your snowman. So we're going to go ahead and drag out a medium-sized shape. And then we're going to go ahead and drag out a third shape, which is the head. So we have the body, the midsection, and the head. So small, medium, and large snowball. Okay, we're going to take the black arrow tool now, and we're going to move around our shapes. Now, guys, I want you to look at what I'm doing here. When I move around my shapes, if your snowman looks like this, that's not how it would look, right? it looks like rocks that are stacked on top of each other. So what would happen with snow is the gravity and the weight would push down. So make sure that they're overlapping. Also, make sure that they're not perfectly straight up and down, or else he looks very mechanical, right? Now, if they overlap a lot, he looks like he's really heavy and hunched over. And if they're a little bit less overlapping, he looks a little bit taller. Okay, but I like to give mine a little bit of gesture. I like to give it a little bit of a lean like this. I want to show you guys how to do an extra little thing, and that is we're going to alter these circles with the white arrow. So come up to the white arrow tool right here, which is your direct selection tool, and then watch what I'm going to do, and then you go ahead and try it. So we're going to go ahead and grab the bottom anchor point of each circle by clicking on it with the white arrow tool. And then what I'm going to do is just raise this up a little bit. Look what's happening. You see how it looks like the bottom is kind of squished? And then I'm going to do the same thing to the middle one. I'm going to squish it. And I'm going to do the same thing to the top one. I'm going to squish it a little bit. So now it looks as though those circles, I'll show you before and after, they were circles, and now they have a little bit more shape to them. Next up, we're going to go ahead and go to our ellipse tool again, but this time what we're going to do with the circles is we're going to make perfect circles. So we're going to hold Shift and Option, and we're going to make these circles black because we're going to make buttons. Now, the actual color of the fill is not black. It's going to be like a dark gray. So we're going to go ahead and make the fill a pretty dark gray color, and then I'm going to make the stroke a black color. And I'm going to drag out 3 different, slightly different size buttons for his vest. And I'm going to drag out 2 different size eyeballs. Now, if you make them the same size, it won't have as much personality. If you make them small, they'll have a certain look. If you make them large, they'll have a different look. My snowman looks like he's a little bit, sort of like a little baby snowman. He's got big, giant eyes. I'm going to make some buttons here for a smiley face. You can move these little parts around, and depending on how you move them around, it gives the illusion that he's looking in one direction or he's facing in another direction. We're going to go ahead and put a hat on the snowman, and this is the part that is the most complicated. We're going to give him a big top hat, and we're going to try to make this top hat out of circles. We are going to have to use the pen tool at some point, but for now, let's go ahead and just use circles. We're going to drag a big circle that looks like a halo or something around the head, or a giant pizza or a surfboard around the head, so it covers up the eyes a little bit, something like that, and I'm going to let go. So I just dropped this plate on top of his head. Now I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to do the same thing, but this time I'm going to make a smaller one, okay, something like that. So now I have 2 floating plates on top of the snowman's head. Take the pen tool, and I'm just going to do this. Click, 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 close. Now I need to do this. I need to move this circle to the front. How do I move this to the front? Command, Shift, bracket, under the plus. Now if you made this and you're like, oh, I didn't get it, it's terrible, you can adjust these parts. You don't just get frustrated and delete it. You could adjust these things endlessly. I could go, oh, I'll make this a little bigger. I'll make this a little bit wider. I'll move this up over here. I'll put this piece back down over here. You don't want to grab one piece and then go like this and start tilting it, because then everything else is going to be off, right? So I want to hold Shift. So I want to click on one piece, hold Shift, get the next piece, hold Shift, get the next piece. And now we are going to tilt all of them together. Watch this. If you go around the outside of this bounding box here, this transform box, my arrow tool turns into a curve, a curved arrow. The curved arrow allows me to tilt it. So look at that. Now it's tilted over his eyes a little bit. I can move it up or down. So we can nudge this thing around. So if you guys go to your shape tool, we haven't used this tool yet. If you go to your ellipse tool and hold down your mouse button, you can come down to this thing called the line segment tool. And what that allows you to do is just drag out line segments. So for the snowman's arms, we're just going to drag a line and drag a line. So this is like twigs. So I just dragged out some arms, like we jammed a stick into the snow. Load it up. We want to get a bright color with no stroke. So we want no stroke, and we want a bright color, whatever color you want. So if you want to put a bright blue stripe on your snowman's hat, bright purple, whatever color you think. I'm going to start by clicking halfway up on his hat. So right here, I'm just going to drop one anchor point by clicking halfway up on his hat. Now I'm going to come across to the other side. And this time I'm going to click and drag up into the right, and I'm going to create this sort of smiley face line. Okay, so I'm dragging, click and drag up into the right to about there and let go. Now it looks terrible. That's okay. We're going to fix it. The next step is to stop this so that I can move in another direction. Do you guys remember to stop it? I have to click on that point, like our bumpy line. Remember, now it's stopped and I can change direction. Now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click once down here. Now it looks like that. It really looks like a weird shape. Now I'm going to come across the other side and I'm going to click and drag up and this way, and that is going to give me another smiley face, and let go. And now I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to close it. Look at what I just did here. Okay, we're going to do some shading. What does that even mean? So what we want to do is try to make this thing not look so flat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys what I'm thinking of when I do this, because you have to kind of understand what we're trying to do here to figure out how to shade this. So I'm going to take my sun. I'm going to borrow the sun here from my other picture. You guys don't have to do this. This is just an indication of where the light is coming from. So let's say that the sun is up here above the snowman, shining light down on the snowman. If my sun was over here, if my light source was over here, where would there be a shadow? It would be on the other side, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to drag a shadow underneath my snowman. It'll look like a puddle. Okay, so right here, I'm going to drag a ellipse that cuts right into the snowman like that. I don't want it to be yellow. I want it to be a medium blue color, something like that, with no stroke. Now, right now, it doesn't make any sense, but in a second, you're going to see how it does make sense. I'm going to send it to the back. Command, Shift, bracket under the minus, and send it all the way to the back. Now my snowman looks like he's casting a shadow onto the snow. So where else would there be a shadow? Not only under his butt, where else would there be a shadow? Under his hat, where else? His belly. Okay, so we're going to go under his belly, under his head, and under his hat with shadows. So I'm going to drag a circle under his hat, which looks like a blindfold right now. We just covered up his whole face with a blue square. Don't worry. We're going to send this backward until it is under the hat but above the face. So I'm going to go back. So I'm doing command, bracket under the minus, bracket under the minus, command, bracket, 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 right there. That's perfect. In properties over here, you could change the opacity to lower it and make it transparent. Look what just happened. I'm not done yet though. So I lowered this to about 65%. And now watch what happens when I click opacity. You guys remember Photoshop when we talked about blend modes? You know how it was set to normal and then you could change it to something else to blend backgrounds together? Illustrator has the same thing. So instead of normal, I'm going to choose multiply. If I change it to multiply, now it looks like an actual shadow under his hat. So 65 opacity to multiply. Now look what happens to that circle. The eyedropper tool. So what's going to happen with the eyedropper tool? Watch this. If I have this selected but I want it to look like this, I eyedrop it and it takes the same appearance, 65% multiply. I'll just go ahead and do that. You guys don't have to do this part if you're thinking like, oh man, I don't want to try that. I don't want to mess anything up. If I drag an ellipse right here, and I send this back to there, and then I change this to the same thing, 65% multiply. Look what happens. I'm going to turn this up a little bit so you can see it. You see the shadow? I'm going to zoom in. Where would I have highlights? I'd have highlights on this side of the snowman in the top. So the top of his hat, there'd probably be a highlight here and a highlight here and a highlight here. We're going to make this hat look really awesome in just a second. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and grab my ellipse tool again, and I'm going to make one circle. Now the color of this circle, I want it to be the same color as the light. So what color is my light? It's yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my eyedropper tool and make it yellow. I might want to lighten it up a little bit so that you guys can see it better. So I'm going to go with this really, really bright, light color. Okay? So I made one ellipse. Now watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to make another ellipse. Some of you might already have guessed what I'm about to go for here. You guys know what I'm going to do? That's right. I'm not only going to merge them together, I'm going to cut them. Remember the moon that we made where we cut the piece out of the piece? Okay, so what I do is I make two circles that overlap, click on one, shift click on the other, and then I go to this tool, the shape builder tool, if you remember, and I option drag my two pieces away. So now I'm left with this highlight, which looks like it follows the shape. You know how hard that would be to draw that with the pen tool right now? I mean, I could do this, but why? Why would I do that when I can get it perfect by cutting it out of those two shapes? Now, highlights are a little bit different. Instead of going over here and changing this to multiply, I'm going to change this to screen. Screen is a lightened blend mode. It lightens everything. So then I'm going to take my opacity down to about 40 or 50% again. And let me zoom out so you guys can see this. Whoop, there it is. So there's a nice light color happening on the hat. I'm going to do this again on the other side over here. Okay, I'm going to put one more highlight on the snowman's head, and then I think we're good. So I just make two circles, shift click them both, take my shape builder tool. Okay, so going back to the snowman's face and adding another little bit of detail here that we haven't got to, we're going to go ahead and get our pen tool. So go to your pen tool. Now what I want you guys to do is I want you to draw the carrot off to the side over here, and then we're going to move it onto the face. I think the reason for that is I don't want you to feel too much like, oh, it's not right, it's the wrong size, it just doesn't look good, it's not placed right. I want you to just draw the carrot over here off to the left, and then we're going to pull it over here and put it in the snowball. So I just clicked one time to drop an anchor point. Now I'm going to move over this way in this direction, and I'm going to go ahead and click and drag so that I have sort of a curve. You see how it's curving for me a little bit? You don't want it to be too drastic, just enough to get it like a hook, like that. Okay, so you're just going to drag that out and let go. Now we're actually not going to stop this point. I dragged it out. I want it to keep going this way. I'm just going to come over here. Notice what happens when I'm moving. It's bending that line over like a piece of string. And I'm going to go ahead and close it. When I close it, I'm not just going to click. I'm going to click and drag so that I can get sort of a nice little teardrop shape, something like that. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly what you wanted it to be. But guess what we're going to do now? We're not just going to stay with that shape because we just made it. We're going to use the white arrow tool, the direct selection tool, white arrow tool, and we're going to move these things around. So I can move the handles. I can move the points until it looks the way that I want it to look. You could adjust these handles, make it wider, make it shorter, curve it one way, curve it the other way. It doesn't need to be perfect the first time because you can always change it and manipulate it. Now what I'm going to do is take my black arrow tool and put the carrot on the snowman's face like that. Boop. Okay, so to get a little bit fancier with the carrot, we could put some shading on the carrot. So for those of you that have already kind of taken off and gone into your own thing, and everything you do, you're putting highlights and shadows on there, which is great. I'm going to zoom in here and show you how I would shade or highlight the carrot or render the carrot.
Thanks for watching. Like, there's like a little button that they put on the laptop or something, and then they say click it, and then you can never even miss a video.
That's if you subscribe.